Hi, good evening, everybody. I understand that some of you are having a difficulty in interpreting directions for Integrative Project 1 Part 3. The purpose of this video is to go over both parts, Part A, Part B, Part 3A and Part 3B, and give you some directions on how to complete these. In Part 3A, the question is that you are looking at the EHR RFP template, and you also have a UT Health EHR RFP, and you have to compare whether the UT Health RFP conforms to the RFP template that's there in the first document. So the RFP template is this one, and if you look at this RFP template, it has multiple sections, background information, request for information, and all the other supporting documentation that you need to provide, especially some of the questions that come up later on in terms of the functionality requirements and so on and so forth. So I just want you to go through the UT RFP and see whether they have met the RFP template, at least in spirit. Sometimes it may not be exactly like this, but at least they addressed many of these things or not. Or if there are some glaring omissions that you have found, I do want you to include those as well, because that comparison would help you understand what the vendors might be offering, and whether you want to be able to include quite extensively what you are looking for. And so by comparing the UT RFP, then you would be able to figure out whether all organizations use this RFP template or not, right? So that is the goal of Part 3A. When it comes to Part 3B, what I want you to understand is that you are comparing three vendors. Three vendors already submitted their proposals, and based on their proposals, based on the information that you know for these three vendors, vendor A, vendor B, and vendor C, I want you to be able to assign rankings and compare them, just to get us some quantitative data to decide on the vendors. Quantitative data is not the only thing. So, for example, you have heard the saying that numbers never lie, but there is also another saying that says numbers don't tell the whole story. But this part is asking us to at least look at the quantitative ratings and get an idea of the quantitative ratings, and so that you could use those quantitative ratings in addition to other qualitative data that you have about these three vendors, right? So when you complete the spreadsheet, I'll come to the spreadsheet very shortly, but when you complete the spreadsheet, for each vendor, I want you to assign a rating 8 to 10, very confident, or confident from 5 to 7, or somewhat confident from 1 to 4, right? So, for example, the rating for vendor A for the first category, charting, is you feel very confident for vendor A, very confident for vendor B, very confident for vendor C. So you could assign a rating for each of these in terms of either 8, 9 or 10 for each of these. And the priority is 10, so priority, you could extend the priority to 10 for each of the sub questions in charting. And similarly for prescriptions, priority is still 10, and you feel very confident here for vendor A, somewhat confident for vendor B, somewhat confident for vendor C. So for vendor A, these questions you'll assign 8, 9 or 10 for each of these questions, or you could and for vendor B you would assign something like 5, 6 or 7 depending on your confidence level. So it's up to you on how you would assign those, as long as you assign them consistently in that range. So now let's look at how to translate these into the spreadsheet. So we have, for example, let's look at the prescriptions. Prescriptions has a priority of 10. For vendor A, for prescriptions, you feel very confident, and you feel somewhat confident for vendor B and somewhat confident for vendor C that they could meet the prescription requirements. So you would go to the spreadsheet in this case, and the priority is 10. So if you look at this spreadsheet, let me expand it a little bit here. So I'm going to put priority of 10 here, and I'm also going to enter priority of 10 for each of these sub questions under prescriptions. All right. So I entered 10 for prescriptions in the priority column. So if you scroll up, you see that this is the column B is the priority column 10, and the same 10 is I dragged and dropped the same 10 into every one of these. For vendor A, column C is vendor A, rating for vendor A. Column D is rating for vendor B, and column E is for C. So I feel very confident that vendor A could meet. So maybe I'll give vendor A a rating of 9, and vendor B is somewhat confident. So I'd give vendor B a rating of let's say 7, and vendor C is also somewhat confident. See, where am I getting this information? I'm getting this from the assignment description. For vendor B, it is somewhat confident. For vendor C, it is somewhat confident. So I'm going to enter 7 for vendor B. When it is somewhat confident, you have a range, right? Similarly, when it is very confident, you have a range of 8 to 10. For somewhat confident, the range is from 5 to 7. So how are you deciding these? Depending on their the proposals that they submitted, or depending on the information that you gathered about these vendors. The idea is that we don't have that information for this assignment, but I do want you to think about it and assign a number, right? So it doesn't really matter what number you assign, as long as you understand that you have to do some work when it comes to real live project in order to assign these numbers. So maybe for vendor C, you would assign a rating of 6. And then for each of these sub questions, perhaps you could say it's 9 for most of these questions for vendor A, because you feel really confident that vendor A could meet this. And maybe a couple of questions get 8. And the last question perhaps is another 9. Or any value that you assign in the range from 8 to 10 for these is fine. Now when it comes to vendor B, once again, since you feel that you are somewhat confident that vendor B meets prescriptions, you would be assigning one of the numbers 5, 6 or 7 You assigned a number 7 here for prescriptions, so maybe most of them are 7. So you will start assigning 7 for many of these questions, and then maybe the last question is a 6. So you could assign 5, 6, or 7 in this column. Similarly, for vendor C, it is a 6 that you thought somewhat confident. So maybe some of them are 5, some of them are 6, some of them are 7. So a couple of 6s, 1, 5, 1, 7, and a 6, 5, and 6. In a real life project, real life organization, many people in the project team will be sitting around, they evaluate these proposals, and they discuss, and they come up with a consensus of what ratings to assign, and that's how they arrive at it. But the fact is that you went through that exercise in your mind, and then you assign these numbers. Once you enter these numbers, please note that these last 3 columns, the priority ratings, are automatically computed because we have built-in formula here. B20 times C20, similarly B20 times D20. Those two are multiplied together and you arrive at these numbers. So you don't have to do anything for columns F, G, and H. So once you do this for all these categories, the charting, we already went through prescriptions, lab results and management, and so on and so forth. In the end, once you complete all these grids, values in these cells, in the end, you will get a number for vendor A, vendor B, vendor C. The higher the better, and that tells you the numbers part of numbers never lie. But then you also will make a decision based on numbers don't tell the whole story. So you look at every one of those qualitative aspects, for example, reviews is one crucial factor, and the stability of the organization is another crucial factor. Stability of the vendor as an organization, how long have they been in business, and what's the likelihood that they would continue to be in business so that they can service your products, and once they are installed, all those factors also come into picture, right? So that's how you complete the spreadsheet, and I hope this makes sense for integrative project 1 part 3. If you have any questions, as always, please look me up.